Hello and welcome to a session to discuss the question of investors and the patience premium. So thank you to all of you for coming along today, and thank you to everyone online for being here at a time that has been absolutely crazy and dominated by lots of short-term news and dramas in the news cycle in the last 48 hours. But we're here to discuss the long term, and in particular the question of how we're going to fund some of the really exciting innovations that are developing today, because I sit in Cambridge University, where I see the fact that we are living through a veritable golden age of science. That's not just my words. Demis Hassabis, founder of DeepMind, said that several times this week in Davos. So we live in an extraordinarily blessed golden age of science, and yet our capital markets, for the most part, are structured to take only short-term bets, or at best medium-term bets, rather than the kind of long-term bets that are needed to really drive and fund turning this golden age of science into practical innovations, whether it's in quantum or AI or life sciences or green tech and so much more. So I have an amazing collection of people today to talk about how we can actually get the long-term funding that's needed to unleash these near miraculous discoveries. On my immediate left, your right, is Eric Xie, who is Chief Executive Officer of Sino Biopharmaceutical in Hong Kong, one of the life sciences companies which is part of this new scientific revolution. Next to him is a late addition to the panel, who is,
Verena Kuhn, heading the forum Startup Communities.
Fantastic, who's replacing Hélène Nubi, who was called away, unfortunately, by all these short-term dramas. Next to her is Zachary Bogue, managing partner and co-founder of DCVC Capital, which is one of the private investors or private capital groups trying to fund this. And at the end is Pandu Shrahir, who is CEO of Danantara Investment Management, Chief Investment Officer of Danantara Indonesia, a sovereign wealth fund. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming along today. And perhaps I'm going to start with you, Zachary, because you have been funding some of the breakthroughs in science. What do you see as the biggest problem right now in terms of trying to get that type of capital flowing? And if you had to pick one area where you're keen to invest right now, what would it be?
Terrific, and obviously thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, obviously, around commercializing science, that's a little bit directionally different from what we do. So we obviously, breakthrough science is sort of a necessary but not sufficient condition. So obviously, when the techno-economics is actually mission critical for us, because you can't just have a scientific breakthrough, you also need to have a team and capital around it. And that obviously is how you go the long distance to kind of produce returns in this area. Because we're obviously a for-profit venture fund. And we luckily have 10-year fund lives, which oftentimes we exceed. And so that actually gives us the capacity to make these long-term bets. But it's not our job to commercialize a technological breakthrough that folks want to exist. We actually look at it in reverse. Like, can this tech breakthrough enable a viable and terrific business in the long run? So that's how we think about it.
Right.
And you asked about an area.
Yeah. What part of the capital structure you'd like to be in, and what type of sector are you particularly focused on right now?
So we are broad mandate, early stage deep tech. That means we back entrepreneurs solving hard, real-world problems. So we are at the seed and Series A and have capital to sort of follow them up into the mid-range. That's where we sit on the capital stack. Two areas that I'm most excited right now is our AI-enabled energy platforms that are producing new types of energy, and also we do a fair amount of investing in the tech bio sector. And tech bio is sort of the reverse of biotech. These are where companies, this also is a long-dated problem, where companies first and foremost set out and build a proprietary, highly structured data set, which then they can then run machine learning or other AI algorithms on, and then go off and hit targets in pharma or in diagnostics. Again, very expensive upfront, revenue lags, so you need to have patience and sort of really help propel them through that period.
And just before I turn to the others, why aren't there more of you? Why aren't there more people investing in this type of activity?
I think it's actually very difficult. It requires a diverse set of skills, right? We need to do everything from understanding, is this a true technological breakthrough, to understanding where will additional capital come from? Where can we get sort of follow-on capital for this fund? And is this a terrific team? And sort of everything in between. So this just requires a very diverse set of skill sets. I think different from other venture funds, we have, on my team, I have more published scientists than MBAs.
Wow, that's pretty unusual. Wow, gosh, fascinating. Well, Eric, you are one of the companies involved in trying to commercialize science at the moment. Tell us what your company actually does and who invests in you.
So again, great and happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So Sana Biopharm, we're one of the largest prescription drug company in China currently. And then we're focused in oncology, hepatitis, respiratory, surgery, and logistics. We're right now China focused around of $5 billion USD sales. 90% it contributed from China. And it's one of our aim to become global, to also access the rest of the world. So we hope that our products can benefit and global patients rather than just Chinese patients. So in the course, we do a full R&D structure. There's 20,000 employees in our group. So we do the full capacity of research and development, manufacture, and commercialization. And right now, already some of our products are exported to over 30 countries globally. And we're seeing more and more innovation coming out as well. So we transformed from a very generic company to a blended company, and then until for the past 5 to 10 years, we fully transformed into a company that half of our revenue are coming from innovative products. And every year we have 3 to 5 innovative drugs coming to the market, passing NDA.
Right. And so who funds you? Where do you get your funding from?
We're already a very mature company.
Or who did fund you?
Actually, we're like a big pharma company that we are listed in the Hong Kong market in the 2000s. Our market cap right now is somewhere around 16 billion USD, and then still growing. So we fund others right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, where did your money come from to actually grow you?
So in the beginning, actually, we started off from a conglomerate. So we started off as a family business of CP Group. So we're very big in agriculture, food, real estate, telecommunication, etc. And pharmaceutical is one of the new sector that we founded by my father in the 1990s.
Right.
Yeah, and then I became CEO 5 years ago, and then start the new lead of the company. So we really experienced China from having like chemicals, generics only, and then the generation now that everything is innovative driven. There's a difference between innovative drugs as well as basic care drugs or like off-patent drugs. So that's the difference of it. Yeah.
So basically you had, if you like, internal patient capital available for you for actually growing this up in a way that most companies don't actually have, which is obviously a great advantage.
Yes, I think it's the different gifts of generation, because when we started, we're only in the millions of RMB. So actually we started from M&Aing as well. From growing like very small firms into the size of today. From the very start, we're only 40 million in market cap in 2000, and then there's one point that we're 500x in return. So I think it is a mix of base that we've building, and also always a transformation in a very strong team to bring forward. So just as Zachary said, it's like we need people, we need scientists, we need a manufacturer, we need people who knows the infra, we need compliance, commercialization, all of them. So we built through from the very past. And then I think it is different from before is a generic generation until 20 years ago, or even let's say 30 years ago, to what now is like you need global funding, you need financing to bring a drug to how it is now. Right now it's like one data is on average, a drug to come to the market globally needs it went up and up year by year. It's 2.6 billion in average right now, and 60% of it is clinical trial costs. So a lot of like new biotechs, they fail in the very start. And then so it is our job right now to really incubate and be patient to help them over. So it's not just in financial terms funding them, but it's also helping them hand by hand. If it's just a research team of a dozen or less than 60 people, then we help them to build also, give them CMC support, give them clinical trial support, with regulatory support, with BD support to access global.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I can see Zachary nodding there because 2.6 billion is a lot of money, and there aren't that many places in the private capital, venture capital world, which can actually easily fund that, as opposed to having this long-term patient family capital in many ways.
Correct. And so, oftentimes for a tech bio or a biotech startup, you do, at the earliest stages, spend a fair amount of money. This is sort of money that's approachable on venture capital dollars. But you really need to pick the companies that already have, they're already working with big pharma. So the way that, this is addressed for many of my companies is, preliminary partnerships and, partnerships over time with big pharma. Because ultimately, you don't want to be just using venture capital dollars to run clinical trials, where we have terrific pharma companies around the world, this one included, that actually specialize in running clinical trials. So that really is sort of the name of the game, is make sure you're backing companies that can partner with big pharma once they do have a novel, best-in-class or first-of-a-kind treatment in a given sector.
Just to add more in that,
Yes.
is actually right now the hardest part is actually before POC, proof of concept. So it's just like right now all the capitals or big pharmas would all like to invest in a validated target of drug, because it is like a more securing investment and of quick wins. So we often see like right now huge deals are coming out, especially maybe last year from China, of like providing is like this, we call it talent dividends, drugs developing very fast, quickly, and with good quality. So I think this is one point that after proof of concept, it's easy to get funding. What is hard that we really have to help to build an ecosystem is early on. So what scientists, it's like what kind of molecule that they're building, what new target, and how we can help them not only, because usually scientists won't have the skill sets of building up a team.
Yes.
And then so we help them to find the right labs, give them the right CMC, find the right CRO when we provide all of these services, and even help them to find a clinical team with our own. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's what I hear, again, from Cambridge, because I split my time between Cambridge University and the Financial Times. And, what I hear is that you can get the initial seed capital just to play around with an idea. Once you've had proper proof of concept, you can get that money. It's that valley of death between the two that is so challenging. But Pandu, I'd like to bring you in, because sovereign wealth funds used to be somewhat, discounted or ignored in terms of the global financial system a couple of decades ago. And now they're emerging really as a key pillar of not just global finance, but a key source of patient long-term capital. Are you involved in funding this type of activity? And if so, in what way?
Yeah, I think sovereign wealth fund now has played a much bigger role. I would say even the last 5-6 years, much more prominent. And I guess we are playing some role in that. And the good thing about this is that from a cost of capital perspective, sovereign fund probably is one of the lowest cost of capital you can find. And for us, similar to other sovereign funds, we really focus on return. But the good thing is we don't really have to exit. So similar maybe to a family-run business, you want to own a great business forever. Same thing with us, especially things here that are related a lot to society as a large. We're happy to partner up both with family businesses as well as with fund managers. So, this is, for us, Student Antara is new, but the way we're doing it is very similar to all the largest sovereign wealth funds.
Right. And so what do you actually invest in terms of the biotech or green tech or AI quantum landscape? Are you agnostic and you just grab whatever opportunity you see, or do you try and focus in particular sectors and parts of the capital stack?
Well, first, we are 11 months old.
Oh, right. Okay. So you're not even a toddler yet.
We're not even a toddler, but a toddler with a lot of responsibility. We have about 1,040 companies being put into us. we're about $1 trillion of assets right away. So it's a very big toddler.
That's a very,
And the toddler now needs to figure out how to walk and run, and the father wants the toddler to become a man right away.
Right.
So this is one of this thing that,
no pressure then.
No pressure. What we actually would like to say, pressure is a privilege. So
Right.
for all of us that come in. So this is good because you're also in the venture business. We started February, only 3 of us. Now we're 400 people. So
Good
that's quite
heavens
fast,
above.
right, from a scale perspective. And we just started investing last December. Out of that, we have to invest our dividends to this everywhere in the world. So we're about 50% domestic, 50% global. You asked the right question. We actually want to invest in businesses that can elevate also for Indonesian society. One of the things we want to focus on, one of it is healthcare. How can we figure out how to increase the welfare of Indonesians? We're also looking at digital infrastructure because everyone, well, at least outside the promenade, talks about AI. Here it talks differently, right? But AI has become so important in increasing productivity for our people. So we're willing to partner up globally. So this is good because here we met a bunch of our partners too. We're investing in developed markets like in the US, in Europe. We just started to invest there. We're also obviously investing in Indonesia, but half of our investment is domestic.
Right, interesting. And just very quickly, before I turn to you to ask you about your specific experience of the venture capital world and how it should change, I'm curious, from the sovereign wealth fund perspective, 2 questions. Firstly, do you mostly invest in early stage, seed, Series A, or do you go further down the curve when it's more proven? Do you invest yourself, or are you using third-party managers to do that? And do you have a specific home country bias or specific, what might be called patriotic capitalism mandate? Are you trying to specifically support Indonesia, or is that a kind of global, you just want to make the best returns you can for fiduciary reasons?
So we created a law for Danantara. Number 1, we have to make returns.
Okay, so
That's
you have
number 1.
fiduciary
We have fiduciary,
returns.
we have to make money. And then number 2, no politicians. Number 3, we can hire both Indonesians and non-Indonesians. So we can put CEO in our companies to be non-Indonesians. And then lastly, business judgment rule. You cannot be criminalized for activities. When you ask this question, to be honest with you, in the early stage, we'll outsource to amazing managers like himself. That's their job, scour the world.
So you can't sift through 10,000
And also we don't have
pitches.
that many people anyway
Right.
to do it. So we outsource to the best managers in the world, depending on where they have the biggest moat.
Right.
To give it to them. Once it becomes mature, we're happy to take a stake where we can bring, the idea is that if we invest directly into companies, the only thing we ask, can you make our people better? Meaning, can I bring a transfer of technology, transfer of know-how to our country? Thankfully, our country is not small. Among all the leading sovereign wealth fund, we're probably the biggest country, 300 million people, 28 years young, so very young, GDP 5.5%, and most importantly, politically very stable. Our president is, has the highest number of voters globally. 98 million individuals voted for him, and he has 85% popularity rating. So this is so important now and today. When you want to allocate capital, you want to find stability and safety. So, that's how we all work, with fund managers, just yourself.
So it's not just about the scientific risk, but sorry, Zachary. And then
No, yeah, just go on. I have a comment for once, you guys.
Yes, no, please do. And then
Yes, we, across our 16-year history, we've sort of always engaged with sovereign wealth funds in varying degrees. And actually, there's been a big evolution in those 16 years, where 16 years ago, it was much more about returns. Right, and there was sort of a mention of, hey, how do we support our domestic economy? And then fast forward 15 or 16 years, now there is a sort of intense focus on both. So it's returns, but also, as Pandu mentioned, sort of how does this, actually benefit the core population, that the sovereign wealth fund is actually created, on behalf of. And this actually, luckily for us, that comports well with the deep tech business model and these long bets because, at the core, we are, backing entrepreneurs that are solving hard real-world problems with AI. And oftentimes those are some of the problems that the sovereigns or they themselves hoping to sort of begin approaching solutions to for their local populations.
Right.
I would really like to comment as well. A lot of respect on that aspect. It's like for the family business, we're over 100 years old already. We're the largest conglomerate in Thailand. And actually, we were the first foreign direct investor into China in 1978. So it's just like for myself, I'm already first generation. But in terms of pharmaceutical, maybe second generations in this aspects. So it's just like we really helped China into transformation. By then, hepatitis B was one of the biggest problems in China. So there was like a 80 million population with it. Yeah, right. And then population then wasn't as huge, but it was still a great number already. So we really helped develop like all the first generics in China of a lot of different TAs to really bring down the cost of originals. Because by then, China wasn't a wealthy country, it was a developing country as well by then. So it's like we started very big, becoming very big, and grew up with doing generics. I think that was also the path how Indonesia was experienced. Yeah. And then right now it's also in the midst of transforming from a generic-based chemical manufacturer into a more, let's say, large molecule and innovative player, especially with the population booming, growing, economy growing as well. So we indeed looked into the market as well. And then when you say it's like one of the top line is how it can benefit the Indonesian people and how we bring is like in our aspect, we want allies and we want the market of entire Southeast Asia, not only Thailand but also and China, but also like in Pan-Asia populations. Also in terms of clinical trials, how everyone is participating MRCT in like the global trials, where what I just said is 2.6 billion on average to bring one drug globally. But if we just look into the size of, let's say, Asia, that cost might be cut into just 20%, 80% off. Right? So it's just like if we can bring standardizing care, is like what China have done in the past 20 years, to having different divisions, levels of hospitals, and can bring that standardizing care together in Indonesia, and with the second largest population in Asia, not counting India, in that bit, then definitely we see there's a big synergy there. And then I think us at Sena Biopharm as a group and families will definitely love to participate in that infrastructure building.
Absolutely.
Well, it sounds like you're ready to do some deals already. This is the value of Davos. With or without Donald Trump, we can all cut deals. So, there we go. But, well, I can see that you all want to get into this, but I want to bring you in, Varun, and ask, you're looking at ways, I mean, what we're hearing here is that the classic financing model, which frankly tends to dominate the pages of media groups like the Financial Times, is really not what we're looking at today in terms of trying to unleash deep tech and unleash these exciting ventures. You've got some ideas about how we perhaps should be thinking about reimagining some of the private capital model behind this.
Yes.
Tell us about this.
So at the forum, I lead a community of about 400 startups, and most of them are in deep tech. And the first thing I can notice for sure, they are all pivoting to a very small group of VCs, and Zach's VC is amongst them.
So there's 400 startups linked, or you're monitoring within the World Economic Forum, is that
exactly.
correct?
And we have 100 founders with us.
I just mentioned that because I think many people don't actually know that.
Yeah.
So it's important to highlight that aspect of the West's work, because we tend to think it's just big plenary sessions and dramas and things like that.
So 100 of our founders are with us, and end of January we're also closing nominations for our early stage program, Tech Pioneers. So if anyone wants to apply, you're welcome. But all of them actually, they pivot to a handful of VCs that are able to understand deep tech. First of all, you need to underwrite not only the market risk, you need to underwrite the technological risk. And that's why you mentioned, right, you have more scientists than MBAs. The other thing is also you need to structure the capital differently, accept maybe different kinds of milestones, but then also you need to have the LPs behind. I think that's also a bit of a bottleneck. And unfortunately, there is not enough of these VCs. And so what we see in terms of alternatives is startups are increasingly looking, yes, to big partners, to big companies, but now increasingly also to governments as a purchaser. For example, in quantum, that can be a very important early signal also then for investors if they know, well, there is a market, and it's obviously a big market. Another example is one that is very apropos is defense, right? There is a lot of defense spending, and we see a lot of our innovators are pivoting because they have a dual-use technology, and there is a big market there. I also feel like overall startups and technology is becoming much more important for sovereignty. President von der Leyen, she mentioned the number of unicorns in her speech. So we see definitely a regional development there, and the government is playing a big role. But finally, what we also see is sort of a creative new form of financing. I spoke to a company, to a unicorn that is here in Davos today, that is building data centers. And we asked the question, how do you where do you get the money from? And he said, well, we just do it differently. So for the land, they partner with the landowner. And then for the building, they just partner with the hyperscalers, and it's actually quite straightforward financing method. So I think we're going to see more of these new forms, and I think that is good for innovation, and I think that is good for society overall, because we can bring these deep tech to market.
I mean, this is fascinating because in many ways it shows that we're living through a much bigger zeitgeist shift, in that if you look back at the last 4 or 5 decades, or a period that many of us built our careers, except for you look too young. But the overwhelming dominant theme was, neoliberalism, free markets, governments shouldn't intervene, governments shouldn't create industrial policy, at least not in the, so-called developed markets, and that, essentially you should have globalized approaches to things and shouldn't have any home country bias. That was a kind of overarching mantra. Now, of course, we're seeing that industrial policy, which the IMF used to call the policy that has no name, now has a name and is on absolutely everyone's lips. And there's a growing sense that actually home country bias is very justified in some sectors, particularly around defence, but not only around defence. So as we move towards these growing use of public-private partnerships, does that create new risks as well? I mean, you, Pandu, are obviously navigating those up close. How do you find it navigating that public-private aspect?
My president just gave a speech today, and he says, for Indonesia, 1,000 friends not enough, one enemy too many. And I think that's well said, because for us, what we do care is the growth of our people, but we also want to make sure it's always win-win. No one country is the best at everything. I think we believe that. No one person is the best at everything. Why Davos still works, why this World Economic Forum is still around, really is just to have a face-to-face, to meet people and to get to know. At the end, what we want to do is advance society, advance ourselves. So for us too, in a sovereign fund, that's why we want willing to invest outside. The only difference is the way we approach it. We're different. There's probably more bilateral relationship, more bilateral discussion in a way to advance each other's needs. Maybe a bit different than it was even a year ago.
Right.
Now it's much more pronounced. Most of the discussion really is just one-on-one.
Right.
Less of a big group going together, let's solve this together. No, it's more one-on-one. How do we solve it? But at the end, I really do believe no one person is the best at everything. We need each other to grow.
So it's still about international partnerships, but a kind of rewired form of approach kind of thing.
At the end, it's the same. I think this is, one of the things, the fear that is being raised. I know a lot of the discussion, at least within the forum, has been geopolitical. But life has to go on. Business has to go on. At the end of the day, us business people, all of us, adjust. But what matters is that we still have to continue to progress, and the only way to progress is through partnership.
Right. Zachary, how do you feel about this era of public-private partnerships emerging in some areas? Is that good or bad in your view?
So one of our core tenets is we really want to invest in companies that don't require government support, don't require subsidies or grants or any of that.
Or agreed purchasing plans and things like that, because that, of course, is coming in.
And obviously in areas, like, for instance, Earth observation, we've invested in several satellite companies. Obviously, the U.S. government is the biggest customer on the planet for that type of data. So you would view you view governments either as an arm's length customer This is for our model, or as an arm's length investor, as Pandu has described. But we don't want to be in the middle where there's sort of the government trying to support it. And we saw this across, our energy portfolio, which luckily largely stayed out of the fray. But a handful of years ago, there was the Inflation Reduction Act, which provided lots of subsidies for lots of
green tech companies. Yes.
Green tech, for lots of, and then obviously that turned on a dime and went away. And now there's another large piece of legislation, and we're also trying to avoid, the incentives that come out of that, or investing companies that rely on that, because again, that seems a little myopic to rely on those. And we actually, to come back to my original point, we just have to look at the unit economics, the techno-economics. Does this at scale actually produce more money and profit than and not? And that's sort of how we approach it.
Right. I'm going to turn in a moment to the audience and ask them any questions, but I'd like to ask you, as you sketch out this new model, are you confident that the financial sector and governments are going to embrace it?
I'm not sure. I actually want to also comment on something that you said, because what I'm seeing more is I don't see startups eager to get any kind of grants. What they typically will say, I have to fill out so much paperwork, I don't even want the grant. I think they're more looking for this arm's length principle that you're talking about. And for me, the current sort of change towards a focus on sovereignty is really, really good for innovation, because what you see is, we see now in Europe, we see now in Asia, a lot of innovation that before probably wouldn't have been there, because everyone would have said, well, there's the US, how are we ever going to compete with them? And now in areas like space, in satellites, etc., there is a market for that. And that really gives it a boost. We see that also in the companies that come to us, that apply. There is more regional diversity. This year we have more European companies that are with us. So for me, that's a good thing.
I just want to,
yeah, please do, yes.
I just want to jump into that as well. So it's just like for us, when we see how we can really help early companies to build, one is like on what stage they are. But the other thing is to provide them not only on capital, but also on capabilities. As Handu had just said, is like everyone is not perfect, right? You need more friends. So what we really provide is not only like the know-hows, but also with like, if you need human resources sector, we give you that. You need financials, we give you the financial numbers. You need compliance, we have that. You need regulatory, we have that. You want government relationship, we provide the team to do all supports as well, in medical, in research, in different domains. So I think it's like once we built that vertical facility, then it's like for any of the let's say biotechs that we help, or through the past decade, actually we collaborated or emanated over 30 biotechs and platforms companies, building of these infrastructure, and even supporting individuals starting their own company, and then providing with all the talents or all the platforms they need. So I think this is one of the other model that we start with, but it needs a lot of, just as you say, into one-on-one in the sectors that we can scout the right people with the right talents. This is number one. Number two is really also in playing with them. So some of the time we start with small deals. For example, with the Lenovo, last July we invested $1 billion USD to fully acquire the company. After the acquisition, actually our market cap went up $6 billion. So definitely it's a very successful M&A. But the other point is we started with leading the C round 5% only, and at acquiring one of their products. CCR8 is one of the first-in-class drug that we saw. But after partnering with them for half a year, to seeing the team capability on how they react, clinical trials, readouts, other projects, molecules, we thought this was one of the best platform that we saw that we need, also can fulfill and combine and build our pipeline. So that was the real acquisition happened. All the DD and readouts came in 2 months, and then we announced the M&A. So I think it's just like one is building for them, number two is play with them.
Right. I want to ask you a bit about the geographical spread of what you see going forward with startup communities. But before we do, let me check. Is anyone in the room keen to ask questions, or anyone got a burning question they'd like to raise? Because I can certainly keep asking questions all day, but I want to quickly ask the audience. Okay, well, in that case, let me ask the question I've been wanting to ask right from the beginning, which is, sitting in Cambridge University in England, there's a constant sense of both hand-wringing about the fact that so much of the innovation and venture capital world is still sitting in Silicon Valley, but also a strong desire to try and diversify and build up the sector in the UK. And what is often said is that, a place like Cambridge, the UK, has a plethora of wannabe startups. It's got a fair amount of seed capital, but it's that scaling capital that's so hard to find right now. I'm curious whether any of you think or hope that we might start to make the distribution a bit less Silicon Valley heavy going forward. What about you, Zachary? I mean, are you based in Silicon Valley? I imagine you probably are, aren't you?
I am based in Silicon Valley.
Right.
I have an investment in a terrific London-based tech bio company called Relation Therapeutics. So and they are scaling nicely, but it is mainly with U.S. dollars, U.S. venture capital dollars. But it's a good thing. And part of the magic of why Silicon Valley works is that it's not just sort of the dollars and the ideas, because obviously phenomenal ideas and technology come out of Cambridge. It's also, there's just a set of entrepreneurs who have been there and done that and have the experience. And how do you take a company from pre-scale to scale, and that talent sort of recycles and renews itself. And so as centers of excellence or new companies scale elsewhere, then you actually see that same talent phenomenon. So that's how I would think about it. And I think it is becoming more diversified and more democratized globally.
Right. Pandu and Eric, I mean, do you see, Malaysia being a new Silicon Valley and Indonesia a new Silicon Valley hub, or how do you see that developing?
I was just in UK for a couple of days with your government, and we had a lot of good conversation about the Oxford-Cambridge corridor and the investment there. I mean, at the end of the day, the war is really on talent. If there is a war, it's how to attract talent. Maybe Silicon Valley is just Silicon Valley. Maybe don't duplicate, because that's where it is. It's almost
we talk
Davos,
about Silicon Fen in Cambridge. What's the equivalent in Indonesia?
And for example, Indonesia, there's a lot of actually innovation happening with respect to downstream industry. How are we thinking about nickel and what are we processing? Critical minerals. A lot of people like
which are now hot
topic, right? But it's been there for a long time. It's just separating energy at the cheapest cost because you need it for AI and other things. Indonesia is very rich at that. Every country has their own right to win, in my view. So if it's Silicon Valley, let Silicon Valley be. Indonesia has its own thing, probably a lot related to energy and critical minerals now, which is the hot story. And I'm sure in Malaysia and China and in Thailand, each one has their own uniqueness.
Right. I can see both. Everyone wants to get in.
Oh, I get excited.
No. Have the Hong Kong perspective first, and then I'd like to bring you in for the overarching spread. Yes.
I think in terms of this, the other thing we really have to pay attention to is talents and clusters. Like Silicon Valley is one of the greatest cluster of the world. The meaning of it is because U.S. is great in education, providing university. I had my university in the States. I was in UPenn Wharton.
All right, so you went to Stanford.
Yeah.
So, like everyone, yes.
Yeah, so it's just like when all of the talents globally world, I think is moving to the States, definitely there will be a cluster of people going after the newest findings, opportunities, and then it is also a place where dream come true and dream go die. But if we think of another bit, it's like a lot of those are based on population. So US have the capability and ability to draw talents from all over the world. That's what made Americans strong and so strong, right? But all other nations are building their education in terms of talents as well. Let's say in China, it's Tsinghua and Beida. So it's just like, and other like Zheda, other schools bring in a lot of like capabilities, courses, studies, concentration majors in AI and finding and implementing not just theories, right? And then we can see that a lot of engineers are coming through the massive base of population of China, right? There is 1.4 billion population. So there are like thousands or the tens of thousands graduating, actually in millions, graduating per year. So there's where talents come from. And then you have that pool and cluster forms in Shanghai, in Jiangsu, in Beijing, in Guangdong. You see different clusters of like different industries. I think that is what is happening with Indonesia as well, with the booming. Definitely in India as well, where there's population, there's always a massive base for talents to come out. And when these people come together as a cluster, then you can develop the real frontier or pioneering one of the strength or advantages that in certain domains that the country is pro of.
Yeah.
In China, it's definitely energy, right? Clean energy, like what President Trump said, said the windmillers joke yesterday.
There are plenty of wind turbines in China, and they're accounting for a large chunk of the power there. So
yeah, but they do contribute to 10% of the entire energy system in China. So those are talks that we don't want to bring that in, but definitely there are wins and loses, and I think there's always pros and cons to each different cluster across the world.
Absolutely. Now, you're looking at it across the entire spread. How do you see the geographic split developing?
Yeah, I see it actually a bit like Eric has just said. I think we're often too focused on Silicon Valley. I just talked about Europe. But when you just look at the hard numbers, yes, the highest number of unicorns is in the US, and most of that is in Silicon Valley. But the second country with number in terms of number of unicorns is China. And the third country is India. And when I look at the talent that they have, and when I look at the demographics, especially in India, then I think we really need to think more about that. And I think one thing I would also mention is we're looking at valuation, we're looking at financing, but that is not always a measure of success, right? I sometimes feel actually Asian companies are better because they have to do their funding. Getting funding there is much harder, so there is almost a more of a selection.
There's more of a hurdle rate there.
Yes, and also I know in India they say build for India, build for the world, because you have to build under really tough conditions, also in terms of consumers. And I think that is something that's going to make the ecosystem there very, very strong. So I feel like we all need to have that on the radar.
I just really want to jump in there. A lot of times there's complaints on like how China manufacture goods, or even in the future, India manufacture goods, or Indonesia manufacture goods are cheaper, and it's like doing exports, taking a lot of like economy or exports. But this is the other thing, because we have huge population. There's huge bases and there's huge demand. So when you supply it, not everyone can afford a very expensive good. So that means it's like, in China it's called 内卷. So people fight for doing better, because there's that much employment opportunities or businesses that survive. So in the end, it's real question of survival rather than having costs lower. Because if you don't lower the cost, you don't survive. So in the end, it's why in the end is like China might be exporting like energy, solar panels, all of these stuff. And then maybe profitability is not of the utmost importance, but market share, or like, let's say revenue, is because people have to survive. Companies have to survive first. And then when they happen to survive in China, they have the capability to export to the rest of the world.
Right.
I think that will also happen to all developing countries at one point.
We just got a couple of minutes left. Anyone got any burning questions from this? Because, yes, quickly. I'll have very quickly. And
potential, but related.
it would be...
We talk a lot about where innovation is happening in the world, but one of the things that we haven't really over. Oh no.
Yeah.
Try. So we talked a lot about where innovation is happening in the world, Silicon Valley, the Golden Triangle, et cetera. But one of the things that we haven't touched on, it would be really great to hear your perspectives on, is the gender parity or lack thereof for the founders that we're seeing. And are we seeing a shift there? Sometimes I come to these events and it can be a little striking. So it'd be great to hear a bit more about if we're seeing a shift and what that looks like in China or in Silicon Valley or Indonesia or even Europe.
Well, since we haven't got much time left, maybe you can answer that, because we have a whole, because you see the entire spectrum right now.
So what we see is we're definitely not where we should be. What we see in our early stage community, we have about a third female founders. Then in a growth stage, that goes down. And amongst the unicorns, it's really about 5% only. So not where it should be. But we do see that it's improving. And we also see that in our community, what I've noticed is that the female founders, they tend to stick together. So I think that's also something that hopefully can help grow the ecosystem.
Right. I can say from my perspective, by the way, that King's College, which I oversee at Cambridge, we have an entrepreneurship lab, an e-lab, and an incubator called Spark that we created about 3 or 4 years ago as the first Oxford or Cambridge college to do a fully fledged, large-scale entrepreneurship lab and a incubator. And it's gone absolute gangbusters. And two things we notice is it tends to be often the non-British kids who jump in first but then that pulls in the British kids as well. And secondly, we do actually have a lot of young female students who jump in too. In fact, in some particular competitions they end up being the slight majority. Now, let's hope they all stick with it, but that is one sign of both Gen Z's enthusiasm for entrepreneurship. I sometimes joke that in a place like Cambridge, it's a gateway drug for capitalism, because Gen Z often says they don't like capitalism, but they all want to run their own ventures. So they start doing entrepreneurship with great enthusiasm. But secondly, I'm hoping that in the future, that will really encourage a new generation and a wider cohort to embrace this type of thing.
Maybe I'll add on this, because I think for especially the guys in the room, you have to make a very conscious effort too. And this goes all the way, not just in terms of the new people you select, but in terms of promotion, in terms of board activations. It goes all the way. So I'll give you an example in Danantara too. The one who runs the entire mining business, Mining Indonesia, top 10 in the world of organization. The main person running it on top is a woman. It's a lady,
Fantastic.
right? Mining, which is actually a very,
Difficult sector
to be in. But the main person that decided at the end is a lady, right? If you look at all Danantara, the leadership too. But you have to force it and you have to make a conscious effort. I'm just coming from me. And
Thank you.
from a guy's perspective, right?
Well, thank you, Panda.
That's important. You have to make a conscious effort.
Well, thank you, Panda. That's really helpful, and that's a wonderful example to wrap up on, because it's been an absolutely fascinating discussion. Really, thank you, all of you, for taking part in it. I take away 2 or 3 points. One is that we do have a huge wave of technological change happening, but we need to find ways to finance it with patient capital. And as we've heard, there simply aren't enough of the Zacharys in the world right now to fund it. So we have to start getting creative and thinking of new forms, whether it's family-owned businesses, private businesses that diversify through a conglomerate structure in a very creative way, as you described, Eric, whether it's sovereign wealth funds, whether it's a type of experiments and vehicles and approaches that you're talking about, it's very badly needed. And the third point is that as this starts to spread, we may start to see more of an equal or less concentrated pattern going forward, both geographically and maybe in terms of gender as well. Anyway, let's hope so. So thank you all very much indeed. Best of luck in your ventures. And here's to surviving the rest of Davos. Thank you.
Thank you.